Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, what is Project 2025?
It's not a secret. Look it up. They are attacking our most vulnerable citizens.
Why one proposed blueprint for a second Trump term is raising alarms.
The Project 2025 plan is not a game.
I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take.
Time for us to play chess, not checkers. It's about making decisions that will affect us as human beings.
That was American actress Taraji P. Henson at the ceremony for the BET Awards last week, talking about Project 2025. After her comments, the phrase started trending on X.
Project 2025. It's a plan that could dramatically change the United States government if it's enacted.
Something called Project 2025, which I know sounds like a sexy CW sci-fi drama starring Ashanti, Chad Michael Murray and Turtle from Entourage, but incredibly, it's even worse than that.
Project 2025 includes a massive overhaul to the federal government as we know it.
One that would turn the Justice Department against critics, deport millions of people in the U.S. illegally, fire perhaps tens of thousands of government staff deemed insufficiently loyal.
Project 2025 is also known as the Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. It's a 900-page plan prepared by a conservative think tank called the Heritage Foundation, one they hope will be adopted by Donald Trump if he wins the next election. But while it's getting a lot of attention right now, this plan isn't new. It was first revealed early last year.
Most normal humans, unlike you and me, aren't going to read 900 pages of something. I have not read all of them, but I have read a lot of them. Hi, my name is Galen. I'm a co-founder of the Lincoln Project, which we launched in December of 2019 to help defeat Donald Trump. I am now part of several other pro-democracy organizations, and we've got just about 100 days to go before the November elections.
Well, Reed, welcome to The Take. It's good to have you. Let's talk about Project 2025. It's this governing plan developed by the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, for the next Republican president. It is a massive plan. What is your main takeaway?
For me, looking at this, some people say 30,000 feet. Let's go up into orbit. For me, Project 2025 is this, simply. It is a plan to dismantle and defund the parts of the American federal government that are supposed to help and protect people at the expense of the parts of the American government that can control people.
Can you expand on that? What does that mean?
So I think it's important to understand that when a guy like Steve Bannon, who was Donald Trump's campaign manager back in 2020, has a very popular podcast. He's currently a federal inmate. He's sort of the spiritual guide of the MAGA movement. And he says, get rid of all the parts of government we don't like. But that's the other part of the evil genius is it can mean whatever it is they want it to mean. And it can change. And I think that's the other part is, again, it's really about power and ideology. And it sort of begins and ends with all of that.
So, Reed, you have written about Project 2025 in the past, and you've described it as a plan to transform the U.S. into an authoritarian country overnight. What specifically is in the plan that you think would do that?
So I think it's important to understand the logistics of how American governments work, too, which is if a new person, in this case Donald Trump, wins on November 5th, on November 6th, his people immediately start the process of building a new government. And that is where they will start the process of implementing not only the worst, but all of the pieces of Project 2025, as they will have access to all of the government agencies, all of the government departments, all of the information. They've already been planning this for years. Because remember, in Trump's first term, they got it wrong. They didn't know how to turn the lights on. They didn't know where the bathrooms were. They didn't know how any of the stuff worked. They know now. They know exactly what they want to do. They're not going to get it wrong a second time.
Well, there will be people listening to this who think, that happens every 4 years. That's exactly what a new administration comes in and does. What's different, in your view, in this case?
Now, look, every presidential administration carries some ideology. Some of it's more pronounced, some of it less. But Trump and his people, I think it's important to understand this. It is a movement. It is an authoritarian movement. The Republican Party is its electoral wing. It is the part of it that runs candidates for office. But the people like the Heritage Foundation, who created Project 2025, are a key component of that movement, whether you call it a think tank or a front group, because they provide the ideological backing and ultimately the personnel. And, there's an expression in American government, personnel is policy. The people that you put in place have a direct effect on how a government agency or an office works. And, we know for a fact that they loathe the Department of Justice. They think the FBI is fundamentally broken. And so they will go in and they will clean house in those places. They will put 100% loyalists in there. And as we've seen in other places, in other examples throughout history, they will also completely take over the other power ministries, whether or not that's the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, the intelligence services, any of those places where they can now exert power on citizens or residents of the United States, they will immediately start to do, because that's one other thing we understand is that when democracy fails at the ballot box and the wrong people win, the authoritarians win, they move very quickly.
Reed, it's a lot to wrap your head around. So let me see if I've got a handle on this. Basically, the fear is, based on what is in this Project 2025, which is readily available for the public to see, is that a new Trump administration would pack the government with loyalists to a President Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
In this, they could also execute or reinstate something called Schedule F, which sounds like really boring HR talk, but it's pretty important because it means that federal employees would be fireable at will. And you could take away civil service protections for these employees and turn these agencies basically into bodies that are answerable only to the Trump administration. Do I have that right?
You have it 100% correct. What Project 2025 is saying is we're not going to take any chances with that. Like anybody who's already there, we're getting rid of you. At least we're going to threaten to get rid of you. But the flip side of that too, though, is some members of the bureaucracy, because this is their job, this is their livelihood, might say, look, I need 25 years to get my full pension and my health care. I'm 24 years and 6 months in. Tell me what you need me to do, and I'll do it. Please understand, I'm not impugning a bureaucrat or the bureaucracy. I'm just saying I would fear that if we're having some expectation that, federal employees are just going to walk out en masse and walk to the barricades because of this, I think we'd be disappointed, unfortunately.
After the break, why Donald Trump is denying any connection to Project 2025. And why Reed finds that hard to believe. So, Reed, I want to give you a grab bag of a few other things in this plan besides dismantling the administrative state. Banning mifepristone, an abortion pill. Banning pornography. Removing the word sexual orientation from all laws and regulations. Dismantling the Department of Education. These are just a handful of things that have been discussed as part of this plan. Now, President Joe Biden said in a campaign statement that Project 2025 should scare every single American. Do you think it would? Or is there a voter base for whom these are exactly what they want?
Yeah, the voter base is Trump's base, specifically evangelical Christians. Anything related to abortion, birth control, any form of human sexuality, for lack of a better way to put it, they want to control that. That is specifically aimed at giving the evangelical community power within a Trump administration. They have been with him from the get-go. He has done everything for them, and they have a noxious symbiotic relationship. The evangelicals want to, quote, and I'm putting air quotes here, I don't know that anybody will see it, return to a time in America that never existed, where, white families were smiling and everybody was happy and everybody, quote, knew their place in the world, right? It is basically a white male-dominated version of the world, which, and I think it's important to understand, these people have been working on for decades, because here's what they understand, whether or not it's their obsession with the federal judiciary, like the Supreme Court, or now with the quote-unquote administrative state, they want to create a country and, frankly, impose a culture they know no longer reflects the country and no longer favors them.
Well, then on that first question, the Biden saying that this will or should scare every American, what's your take on that? Are there enough people who are scared, who agree with you?
I think, I don't know that they're scared yet, but I think they're concerned. And I think that's why you saw Donald Trump took a public step away from Project 2025. Now understand that that is a lie, right? The guy lies as he breathes. So why should we believe that he really believes this thing?
So let me explain what you mean there.
Right.
Trump tried to distance himself from Project 2025. He went on his social media platform, Truth Social, and he said, I have no idea who's behind it. I disagree with some of the things they're saying. He called some of the things they're saying ridiculous and abysmal. Those are quotes. And he said he had nothing to do with it. So you're saying that's a load of baloney.
That's a complete load of baloney. It's a whole package of baloney. Yeah, because all the people who have come up with it are either people that have already worked for him, have demonstrated their 100% loyalty, and are likely to be leaders in a second Trump administration. Stephen Miller, who I find to be as loathsome a character as you can find, said that he had nothing to do with it. He's in the video introducing the program.
Senior advisor to the president.
Assistant press secretary.
You're here to cut government. You're here to do something that's not in their interest.
Trump's public disavowal of Project 2025 is a tactical retreat. They know that there are parts of it that are fundamentally unpopular with the American electorate, with the American voter, and that's why he is now saying, I don't really know what this is. But let me take you to a really scary point about Project 2025. In there, they talk about how they want to restart the testing of nuclear weapons for the first time in more than 30 years. You know why I think they want to do that? Because I think Donald Trump wants to see a mushroom cloud. And I think he wants to be, his version of Oppenheimer at the Trinity site. And I think he wants to see what it looks like. And I think he wants to understand, oh, that's the kind of power I have. And that is truly the power of life and death, not just for you and me, but the entire planet. But let me make it more workaday, for lack of a better way to put it. So in the southern United States, between June and November, we had what's called hurricane season, right? Part of Project 2025 is getting rid of NOAA. That's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. These are the weather people, right? They want to get rid of that. And so think about a situation in which you live in Miami, Florida, and you've heard that there's a hurricane coming, but no one's telling you where it's headed, what strength it might be, because they got rid of the National Hurricane Center, because Donald Trump is still upset that he drew a line on a map with a Sharpie because NOAA disagreed with him. This is the kind of insanity we're talking about, which is, getting rid of the parts of government that protect people.
So we mentioned that Trump has said he has no idea who's behind it, although whether or not that's believable is debatable. But we do know who is behind it. It's an organization called the Heritage Foundation, whose president recently made some pretty controversial comments.
I want to be part of what I call the Second American Revolution, hopefully bloodless or no more blood than has been spilled by the left.
He made these comments on Bannon's podcast. Can you tell me a little bit about the Heritage Foundation? How influential are they?
So the Heritage Foundation was started decades ago by wealthy conservative families to espouse a conservative governing philosophy. As we got into the mid-2000s, right, 2010, 2012, it really started taking a turn towards, let's call it proto-MAGA. It was MAGA before MAGA existed, which was it started taking a much more distinctive ideological perspective. What now the Heritage Foundation has become is simply just a front group for ideological messaging, but also ideological rigor amongst Republican electeds. So, groups like the Heritage Foundation will have what they call report cards for elected members of Congress, state legislators, anybody who's a Republican elected official. And what they do is, at the beginning of a campaign, I want to run for Congress. Fine. My campaign guy will say, here's a questionnaire from the Heritage Foundation. Here's how you're going to answer the questions, right?
Wow.
Heritage is going to be watching. They're going to track every vote you take in the United States House of Representatives. And they're going to score you based on every one of those. So what happens is, okay, now I've got, I'm in office. They're tracking my votes. I've got the report card. I can go home and say, okay, now look, I hold up my report card. Look how well I did. That leads to support from the Heritage Foundation or other conservative administrations. And so what happens is it becomes this flywheel of money, support, control, and then suddenly what you're locked into is a situation in which you're not doing anything that's outside this very narrow and, shallow box, because groups like the Heritage Foundation will take you to task. I mean, look, both the Republican and the Democratic parties have these organizations. Mm-hmm. The difference is that the Republican Party is in the midst of what I would call a slow motion purge. They are looking to get rid of people they don't believe are, ideologically pure, or they're not going to pass a loyalty test.
Well, Reed, I want to pick up on that idea of a purge, because we know that Trump has, in numerous social media posts and interviews, vowed to take revenge on political opponents.
Look, when this election is over, based on what they've done, I would have every right to go after them.
If this plan was implemented, it sounds like it would make it much easier for him to do just that. And you, as co-founder of the Lincoln Project, could be seen as a political opponent. What do you think this could mean for you personally? What does this mean for people you know?
Well, let's just say this. There's Project 2025, there's Trump's promises, and then there was the Supreme Court decision on Trump's immunity, which said, quote, anything that's an official act, he has immunity from. That, I'd be lying if I said you don't spend all day, every day thinking about this, because if you did, it could lock you up. Look, yeah. I have been at this, so many of us have been at this for so long. I don't think that I could stop. I don't think I would stop, right? And let's be clear. I think it's important to understand, too, that the Trump people and the American people in their own right have memory hold what happened in the summer of 2020. I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about in the aftermath of George Floyd. Remember that Trump tweeted, when the looting starts, the shooting starts.
Yeah.
In my mind, and I think we saw on all of our television screens, because we were all locked in our houses, that gave license to federal, state, and local law enforcement to basically do what they would please. Mm-hmm. I think that would be far more in place. I think that would be a far more realistic option in a new Trump administration if there was unrest. And we should expect that there would be. We should expect that there would be protests. Remember that in the summer of 2020, Donald Trump sent officers from the Department of Homeland Security, unmarked, right, unnamed, into the city of Portland under the auspices of, quote, protecting federal property, which they then, threw people in the back of vans. So when we talk about this stuff, we should understand that he's already done it.
I think we have thoroughly frightened at least half of our listeners. And this week we also worked on an episode about the Democratic Party in disarray over Biden's age and whether or not he needs to step down. So with all of this now newfound knowledge at our fingertips, what is your advice for people in the U.S. who are listening to this and just don't know what to do? What does one do?
I would say this, and I think it's very clear. You can be concerned about President Biden. You can be concerned about, if it's not President Biden, maybe it's Vice President Harris that is the Democratic nominee. But I will tell you this, that your life is immeasurably better with a Joe Biden or a Kamala Harris sitting in the Oval Office than it will be with a Donald Trump. There's that expression, everybody ignores politics. Politics doesn't leave you alone. In an authoritarian regime like Trump, I do believe, would create, no one is left alone. And everybody becomes a potential target for things they could never have even imagined. And so I would say this, is that if you have the choice between old and insane, take old every time.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Tamara Khandaker, Chloe K. Lee, and Ashish Malhotra, with Duha Mosaad, Manahil Naveed, Mohammed, Zain, Shafi Khan, Veronique, Eshaya, and me, Malika Bilal. It was edited by Noor Wazwaz. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Joe Plourde mixed this episode. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer, and Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.